down the hammer and pick up the pencil. You're about to listen to the Savvy Radio Show. Learn from real-life real estate investors, experience revealed with the Savvy Landlord as your host.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, friends and family, it's kind of family here because I have my secret sauce, my secret weapon. I have not revealed this individual for a lot of reasons. And so before we get into this individual, this human being, this person that could take you to the next level, I love how I get to meet random people. Well, several years ago, I was on a seminar for the accounting firm with my partner, Rose Taylor. And this speaker or this guest on the Savvy Radio Show did a presentation on there. And it was so powerful. He only had I think there was 30 people or 20. No, there was 10 people in one day jammed on this webinar, which no one wants to be on, right? During COVID-ish. And, there was a lot of great knowledge about accounting firms and about being CEOs and about being a business owner. And then near the end of this long day of overwhelming information, John pops on. And when John pops on, I was like, this dude, I go, Rose, this is the guy that we need to hire. And so, yes, through the computer, through a online VA virtual thing, I met John. How do you pronounce your last? Is it Seiffer?
Seiffer.
How? And I see, this is how I don't care about his name, but Seiffer is the guy that you need to know. Anyway, so Rose and I got off that call. We talked about it. I was like, hey. And so we hired John, the CEO boot camp guy, coach, connoisseur, wisdom, to take us and scale our accounting firm. And it was awesome. And so John, a good friend of mine now, who has impacted my life, came out with a book. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've got to help this guy. And my goal is to help promote him and his book called Output Thinking. You need to get it right now. His last name is Seiffer. Scale faster, manage better, transform your life. But so a little bit about him. He has been a coach, since 1994. I mean, I graduated high school, and give you some perspective here, in 1992. And I love what he says. He's like, he helps business owners, get out of their current muck or stage or rut into focus. And that was one things that really, we were all over the place about who do we hire? How do we hire? How do we scale? And John just took all of our throw up and he put it down. And, he's a past president of the International Coach Federation and Angel Investor Forum. So he knows about money. We found him through the accounting space. And so if you are really, I know this is such a long intro, ladies and gentlemen, but bear with me, it is worth it. I know that when I refer him, it's 100. If you're stuck or you need something in your business, you need to go to this website, ceobootcamp.com. That's ceobootcamp.com. And honestly, just recently, a year ago or so, I just hired you on a one-off and you were kind of awkward about it. You're like, why, what you sure? Yes, I just need 1 hour with you, Sensei Yoda. I just need 1 hour because I was in an acquisition, and John obliged and changed my life. So anyway, so that's a crazy introduction. You like that? It's all raw, authentic. Welcome to the Savvy Radio Show. Hello.
Thank you, Steve. It's good to be here.
Yeah,
and it's good to connect with you again.
Absolutely. So let's just dive in. I know your time's valuable, and people want to get the information as fast as possible. Boom. So why in the world did you write this book, Output Thinking?
I wrote this book because of so many lessons that I learned, first of all, in my own companies. Before, up until 2016, I have been an entrepreneur. Now I still do coaching, but that's really a practice, not a company. And as you alluded to, I'm old. I started doing this a while ago. But since 1994, I've been coaching with hundreds of business owners across the US and some in Europe. And I saw similar patterns of frustration with either their employees or with not being able to tap into the potential they know is in their companies. And the patterns that I saw were as business owners, we tend to be very intuitive. We're very fast. We get things right away, but we're not very procedural. It's not easy to replicate what we do. I call it the grandmother in the kitchen who makes great food but has no recipe.
Hmm.
Thanksgiving dinner is wonderful, but you can't run a restaurant with that. Grandmas don't scale. They're expensive and they're hard to scale. If you
True.
want to run a company, you have to scale. You have to have repeatable systems to produce those outputs that the company needs. And what I've noticed is that many companies at different stages have the same outputs that are needed and the same systems they use. The one exception to that is all the systems around the product that you make. If you make widgets or hamburgers or lawsuits or whatever it is, that part is different. But the sales is very similar, the finance is very similar, the planning, the management, the hiring, all those things can be systemized. And when you systemize them, they can be repeatable and they can be scalable.
So when was the defining moment for you? I mean, you're in your own business. You learned how to scale by creating systems, which is my love language. And we're going to get into that here in a minute. What made you decide to be a coach? When was that defining moment? Because I know I've been a coach for a while now, for about 10 years. And I was always insecure. Like, what could I provide? You've obviously impacted Rose and I's life, but what made you do that? Or what was a defining moment? What was a light bulb moment? You're like, hey, I'm gonna do this.
Well, the defining moment was actually a phone call. And the background to it is I was living in Texas at the time. I'm from the Northeast. So I tell people I'm a Yankee, but not a damn Yankee because I went back. And I had a company there that started, and I wanted to move back for lifestyle reasons. And I thought there's no way this company can move because our customers were all in the South and Southwest. But many companies have a branch office in one state and headquarters in a different state. I figured if they can do it, I can do it. Now, this was in the 90s before the internet made it easy to do remote stuff. They would send me data tapes overnight so I could see what was going on. Anyway, so I move up and shortly thereafter got a phone call from somebody I used to work with who said, you ought to look into this thing called coaching. You'd be great at it. And I said, what's that? It hadn't become a buzzword yet. So I looked into it, got some training, found out I loved coaching with other business owners. And I was part of a group that started the International Coach Federation. And I was their fourth president in 1998. And it's up to like 50,000 members worldwide now of other coaches, people who are either in big companies or in private practice. And I found that coaching business owners allowed me to do two things. One is I love learning about business models, how different businesses works. Like just look around, if your listeners will look around the room they're in right now, everything that is in that room was made by somebody who was making money at it. And it's just really exciting to me to learn how those things work.
That's cool.
And then the other thing I got to do is teach. Once I learned something, I could see patterns that were similar in different companies and help people get out of the hassles and learn the things that I learned by running a remote company from 1,500 miles away.
That's awesome. Is there a specific industry that you were passionate about, or, as an entrepreneur, now I'm in the restaurant business. I didn't know if you knew that, but Rose and I just recently, about a year ago, bought into a franchise, and
cool.
We just signed a lease, and we are in construction. I actually just hired an architect, but that's another day.
Yeah.
So, from me being real estate to accounting and then entrepreneurial, what industries, are in your wheelhouse? Like, what do you love, or where'd you come from, and give us some perspective.
I typically gravitate to B2B companies, but I have clients now that are in retail. I have others that are direct to consumer. The thing that gets me going is the business models, learning how different businesses work and what makes them profitable, what makes them scalable, and what are the systems that are common throughout different businesses in different industries.
Cool. All right. So you can jack of all trades in essence, like it's just basic. And I noticed that just in me running the accounting firm and me coaching it's the same principles. They're it's just interesting. It's like I apply what worked over here, and it's a totally different industry, but it's the same thing, business. And it's hard it seems so cliche, like, oh, there's some secret sauce. No, it's hard work, plans, marketing, sales, income, systems, outgo, flow. I mean, so
And
what
that
was your
and
desire? Yeah. Go
and
ahead.
that's what got me into the output thinking, because people will say, "Oh, in business everything's about people." That's not wrong, but the reason that you hire people is to produce an output.
To make money. It's
Yeah,
just like,
yeah, and you hire different people to produce different outputs.
mm,
And what I've found is that people who are intuitive, like many of us entrepreneurs are, we don't always specify the outputs that we're expecting.
mm.
And so the employee might have a different idea of what a good job looks like. And then that doesn't meet our expectation. And then we get frustrated. And then they get frustrated because they thought they were doing a good job, but we didn't think they were doing a good job. But if you break it out to what are those outputs that we're looking for, then it makes it much easier to hire people, to train people, to manage people, and ultimately to help them succeed as well.
And you just hearing you, I get excited. You know what popped in my mind?
Yeah.
KPIs. KPIs.
Yeah.
I mean, key indicators. And I mean, I think you thrive in that. I think that when we first got with you I mean, a lot of people don't know. I mean, guys, this is my secret sauce to be a CEO. You have to have a coach, and this is him. Like, and I remember when we first kind of get going, and you kind of, sandpaper here. And I'm rebellious. And I remember, you can't track it. You got to track this. You got to have these metrics, and you got to have KPIs. Tell us, to the entrepreneur, how important KPIs are, or how to even get going in that arena. Like, what even simple spreadsheet could create a KPI. Can you
Yeah.
shed some light to the
So
young
KPIs
entrepreneur?
are a way to measure the outputs that people produce. And the interesting thing about outputs, as I started really getting into how to explain it, is the most obvious output is somebody is making a thing. They're making a hamburger in your restaurant, or they're making a widget, or they're making a sale. A salesperson makes a sale. That's a very obvious thing. But sometimes an output is a change in status. A janitor doesn't make the room, but they make the room clean. They change it from being dirty room to clean room.
Hmm.
An inspector changes a part, comes through the pipeline. They look at it. They go, it's either accepted or rejected. They've changed the status. So that is an output. A behavior is an output. So I was on a flight one time, a couple flights, and I had an injured leg. So I was very in tune to the flight attendants being able to help me. And I had this attitude that I realized some of them were friendly and some of them were not. And I thought, wait a minute, that's my judgment.
Hmm.
What is the behavior that I'm noticing that's their output? And I noticed the ones that I thought were friendly smiled more, made eye contact, were proactive about asking if they could help. And the others that didn't do that, I thought they were unfriendly. But you can't judge somebody by their attitudes. You have to judge them by the behavior. I don't know if they were
Or the
friendly or
output.
not. I just know if they smiled, And so that's the output. Decisions are an output. Relationships are an output. Anything visible that somebody produces is the output that you want. And if you are a manager, it's your job to describe those outputs in enough detail that you and the other person can agree whether those outputs were produced properly or not.
Awesome. So everyone should have some sort of a KPI, right? In some form or fashion in their business.
Yeah.
How many widgets does it take to yield this? And how to quantify that, how to measure that. So make sure today, if you're listening to this and you're going into the weekend, you're like, man, I need to do something to work on my business, not in my business. You may be that young entrepreneur or older entrepreneur that really just said, hey, I'm done with the corporate world. The first thing to do is measuring where you're at, and what your output's going to be and how you can keep track of that. All right, so let's tune into now the book. So you said earlier, golly, we're Oklahoma, right? You're in the Northeast, and you coached us, and you had a lot of wisdom about accounting and accounting firms and how to hire and scale and put the right people in the position, general managers and so forth. What was it like to assemble this book, and then kind of give us some content from the book? I know that I've seen you write a blog on this before about the 7 buckets and about systems.
Yeah.
So kind of like, how did you get there? And was there a system for you to write the book? Is there other books coming in? And
Writing
there's
the
a lot
book
of questions there. Yeah.
writing the book was more brutal than I thought. I've been writing blog posts since 2006 or someplace like that. It's on my site that you recommended, ceobootcamp.com. You can see blog posts going
For
back
days.
to
For
the
days.
to the Stone Age.
There's a college
Yeah.
education on there. It's
Right,
all
but
free.
those are small little chunks. When I had to put it together, I had to find a theme and a way that it all hangs together. And that was a lot harder for me than I expected. And I had a great editor, Harriet Powers, who tore my first draft to shreds, and she was totally right about it.
Hmm.
And what I realized was I wasn't saying all the things I wanted to say, and I didn't have a skeleton to hang it on. So what I ended up with was the first part of the book is about what are outputs and how do we think about outputs, because it's very different than thinking about an org chart where you have people and titles and hierarchy. This is about what they actually produce. So I go into a lot of what those outputs are, the qualities of those outputs, what happens when somebody is producing outputs that you're not aware of. That they may be good outputs, like I said, like grandmother in the kitchen with no recipe. She just knows when to throw in a little bit of this, when to throw in a little bit of that, but it's not good for scaling. So that's
Right.
first section is about outputs. Then I say, well, where do outputs come from? They come from either people being intuitive, experienced, like grandma, or they come from systems. So if particularly for the accounting world, you have to take all these receipts and data and information and put it into the right forms. That's a system, and that's repeatable and trainable and scalable. And then we look at what are the actual outputs that those systems produce and where do they group in a company? And those are the buckets that you mentioned. There are 7 buckets that all these outputs fall into. One bucket is making stuff that people want to buy, the product or service that you provide. Another bucket is selling, the marketing, the sales, finding those customers who want to buy that stuff. Those are the 2 main ones. Then there's a bunch of support buckets, which are people, hiring, training, managing people. Then there's money, tracking the money, getting the information, insight from your finances. Then there's information. How does information flow within your company? And then there's a bucket I call CAFE, which stands for compliance, administrative facilities, and et cetera. It's a bunch of checklists of things that if you don't pay attention to them, they could bite you in the butt and cause problems. And then, so those are the 4 supporting buckets. And then the last bucket is the scaling bucket. If you want your company to grow, the outputs in there are plans, goals, strategies, all those kinds of things. And when all those work together, then your company is scalable, profitable, growing. And it does what I mentioned at the very end of the book, the 8th bucket, which is not part of your company. It's for you. What is the company giving you as the business owner? Why are you involved in this part of your
Freedom.
life? The 3 things that are pretty universal people want from their business. They want money. They generally want more of it. They want time. Usually they want time away. They don't want to be working 60, 80 hours a week. They want time to have a life outside their business. And they want work that they love. They want to do things not just because everything has to happen and I've got to do all this stuff I hate, but they do want to do work that they're good at. And that means you have to put a system in place that the other work that's necessary is delegated to somebody who loves it and who's good at it. And there's about 15 other things that people want that aren't so universal. But if you have the 7 buckets of your business, then you can have that 8th bucket, have that business work for you.
Yeah, it's awesome. Of course, the E-Myth, right? You kind of,
I like to think, and my readers will know better than I like to think this book takes off where the E-Myth left. This is the details of how to do the things that the E-Myth was talking about.
Awesome. All right. So I've seen you in the past. Your eyebrows have raised up a couple of times on a couple of key words: culture, values, and attitude. Why is that a thorn? Yeah, why is that a thorn in your flesh? I mean, that's buzzwords. Even in my own accounting firm, we have a culture.
Right.
What's your values and attitude? Come on, tell us what's the hate
love
there.
The concepts behind those words, but I don't like those words because those words are not visible. You can't see culture. You can see behaviors. So if your culture is, let's say, teamwork, what do we mean? What are the behaviors that exemplify teamwork? Does that mean everybody is pushing everybody else to do their best? Does that mean I jump in without being asked to help somebody else? Does that mean I ask for help? Those are all visible behaviors, but sometimes those behaviors can be misinterpreted if you don't specify them. And somebody will say, well, I'm being a team worker because I'm just doing my job and I'm helping out. Somebody else will say, I'm being a team worker because I'm helping everybody else do their job. Well, those are different cultures. Let's describe the attitudes. Let's describe the culture. Let's describe the values in terms of visible behaviors.
Okay. So that's why.
Yeah.
You can't quantify it per se, right? I mean, you can't
You
really,
can't tell if
it's
you're
not
doing
tangible.
it right. You can't,
The cultures are what you're just guessing at this point. And so in your makeup as a coach, as a business leader, you want tangibility. And,
exactly.
these are great things. Interesting. Can't wait to get to that point in the book. All right. So matter of fact, it's in my cart right now on Amazon. I'm going to read this deal. I told John earlier before I got out, hey, it's you're 3 books behind and I'm like, what a dummy. And so I'm ordering the book right now. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, hold me an example. I'm going to do a review of the book here shortly. And so we're going to wrap this up here. And then we're going to bring John back after I'm going to do a review of the book on a separate podcast on my own, beat it up, love on it or whatever. And then we'll have John come back on and I'll really hammer him on some of the content. But John, as we wrap up here, get people anticipating more of the CEO Bootcamp Coach. What's the biggest regret yourself or what you've seen as a coach, or even you personally as an entrepreneur? Like this whole podcast is my whole life right now is entrepreneurship.
So I have 2. One
Okay.
is when I was running that business from 1,500 miles away and it started to get traction, I was too nervous to really pump the sales. The most we ever had was 3 salespeople. And at the time, looking back, I could have done more and grown it faster. And I was just a little too nervous about it. And I didn't understand the place where you want to invest as much as you can when the opportunity is there. And I didn't go fast enough. So that's one regret. But and that's very specific to that particular company. The bigger regret is that it took me too long to understand that not everybody is like me. And this is so true with business owners. I often hear the phrase, I wish my people would think like an owner, which means I wish they would read my mind and do what I would have done in that situation. And my answer to them is, no, you don't. Because if they were any good at that, they would be your competitors, not your employees. It's your job as a manager, as an owner, to figure out where people are at and help them do a better job with their situation and not expect them to just pick up on what you would do in that situation. And I didn't learn that. It took me a long time to learn that, and I wish I'd learned that sooner.
I don't know if that ties into awareness. I think as a culture, we're moving into a lot of people that are not aware of where they're at, what they're doing, or other people, or their performance level. And it's a simple cliche to say, yeah, everyone's on their phone and they're looking down and they're walking and they're hitting things. Yeah, that's a obvious physical unawareness. I think people in general are just not being aware. We're not assisting people to understand the whole scheme of things of society, of what's happening in the process of business. If a sale is not made, we don't have a business. And the person that processes the sale or whatever, we should be all aware of each's own skill set, gifts, and position in that organization or whatever they're trying to accomplish. All right. Let's wrap up with this one. What advice, besides read your book, right? Because I'm going to say that, but we got a few more minutes here, and then we'll see you again shortly. What advice would you give a young entrepreneur? There's a 22-year-old I met the other day. He was 21. He made $22,000. He's on his own. I don't know if he's educated. I don't know, but he was 22. He came into the accounting firm, and he does real estate, some form of fashion. The second year, he made 180 gross and netted 135. And I was like kind of blown away. 22 years old, 135,000 revenue that year. Now, can you duplicate that? Can you do that again? What advice would you have for him? He seemed to me that he was searching for some answers. He was trying to get his accounting dialed in, which is what we do now. But what advice would you give some young entrepreneur that a little success, maybe it was a fluke, maybe it was genuine? What advice would you give that individual?
I would ask him to learn why he was successful. What are the mechanisms behind the business model that he was operating? What parts of that were under his control? What parts of that were not under his control? That would give him an idea whether it's a fluke or not. And the other piece of advice, something I heard from a guy who was the head of edible arrangements. This was a guy who started a floral shop, or actually he worked at a floral shop and ended up taking it over and saying, you know what, flowers aren't that big of a deal. Why don't I make fruit that looks like flowers that you can eat? And now there's hundreds, maybe close to 1,000 edible arrangements outfits all over the world. And he said, the thing that will kill you in business is the thing you don't like. If you don't like the numbers, that's what's going to hurt you. If you love being in the back room looking at the numbers and you don't like being out with customers, that's what's going to hurt you. So pay attention to what you gravitate to. And what he really was saying was the business needs those outputs, even if it's not your natural ability. And you don't have to do it yourself, but the business needs it to be done. And that's what I would pay attention to, that you're not ignoring that you're developing people that you can delegate to who are good at the stuff that you don't like.
Wonderful. Well said. And I was thinking when you were talking, I was like, was it his marketing? Was it his budget? Was it his conversion rate? Was it, his acquisition cost per deal flow? Was it as many calls? So good output. I love that if I can go back and read this transcription, you said output about 20 times. Obviously, am I just looking at and you're saying in your world, not just the output of the income or the end result, but it's the output per section, per area of your business, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. I'll leave you with another little story. You hear motivational speakers talk about guy walking down the street and he sees somebody pounding on rocks with a hammer and chisel. And he says, "What are you doing?" The guy says, "I'm making bricks." And he walks a little further. There's another guy doing the same thing. He says, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm making this wall." And there's always three guys in stories like this. So he goes to the third guy and he says, "What are you doing?" He's pounding on rocks with a hammer and chisel. And he says, "I'm making a cathedral for the glory of God." And the motivational speaker says, "You want to be that third guy, man. Do the cathedral, build big stuff." And as a business owner, I say, no, you want to be the first guy. Because if those bricks aren't straight and square and uniform, your wall's going to fall down. The cathedral's never going to get built. Those outputs happen in very minute details on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. They build up to the ultimate revenue numbers, profit numbers, all those other stuff. But that's made of lots of little pieces, and you have to pay attention to those.
And I think it boils down to take the emotion out of it. Does it work or not? Because if you got into the emotional roller coaster, I'm building the cathedral, and you may be focused on the wrong part of your business. Maybe it's the color, or maybe it's, inexpensive because you're being the steward of God's money. But the reality is it really boils down to the output of that. That's the secret sauce or the thing that's going to make it. If it does not have the bricks, it won't be a wall. It won't be a cathedral. Well said. Good perspective. I was going to go with the cathedral and the big vision. And that's what all these, but really
the vision is important, but it's made up of smaller pieces. And if you don't understand the smaller, objective, observable pieces, the vision will just be a dream. It won't be a reality.
Well, John, it's always a pleasure. I'm just honored to be a part of your success and your new book that just came out. And I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, entrepreneurs, young people, old, all around the world, go to Amazon, type in Output Thinking, and John, Seiffer. And then if you want to go to the next level in your business as an entrepreneur, definitely give John you can email him at john@ceobootcamp.com. Just that simple. CEOBOOTCAMP.com. Well, John, any other words you want to say other than good?
I appreciate you having me on. It's been great to connect with you again, and thanks a lot.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the Savvy Radio Show. Glide online and listen to our other motivating episodes at savvyradioshow.com. Connect on Twitter at LandlordBook and always be buying assets.